Hey, Stacey. Okay, thanks for getting this in. Here are your finals. Um, okay, so your compositions and your depth of field are really gorgeous. For especially these first two. All of them, really. The depth of field might be a wee bit off here. This is a tough one because you're looking down to it. You have an aerial view and you're looking down into it, and it's hard for me to tell what's in fine focus on this one, so we'll just skip that one. But the rest of them are really, really good, and this narrow depth of field is working beautifully for you in all of them. And then these are nice clean images. Okay, so that's fine. And now, looking at your contact sheets, you bracketed with your shutter speed instead of your aperture. And the reason why in this assignment, I know it doesn't detail it, but the reason why we ask you to bracket with your aperture is because using continuous light, your shutter speeds are pretty limited when you're shooting with continuous light because the light's just not that bright, really. It seems like it is, but it's not. And so unless you have an incredible tripod and you're always committed to using it, you're really going to have to be compensating for the dim light with your aperture. And that's why we wanted you to bracket with your aperture, is because that's what we expect you to be using. You're going to be prioritizing probably at the slowest shutter speed you can handle with your equipment, and then you'll be bracketing with your aperture. And so I don't know why you would have chosen to bracket with shutter speed instead, because actually the bracketing with aperture is pretty clearly stated in the instructions. So maybe you can let me know. I'm just curious, because it'll help me provide more clarifying instructions for students next time I teach it, if you just let me know what made you think you should bracket with your shutter speed instead of aperture. Anyways, then back to white balance. So you have two really distinct choices with white balance. Twice in two images, you make it very cool. You make it's probably way up there in like 6,500 Kelvin temperature. And then in these images, they're rather warm. They're probably about 4,000, maybe a little bit lower Kelvin temperature. And so we remember from the lectures and the readings that we read that people respond a little bit more positively to Kelvin temperatures that are on the lower end of things. So they're considered cooler in Kelvin terms, but like aesthetically we consider them warmer because they have kind of a yellowish or orangish feel. So these images with your white balance make sense to me. These are very cold, and that's a strange choice. Now the compositions and the use of depth of field is so effective that I still have a very positive response to the images, but I think it's a really interesting choice for white balance. It's not what I would expect. I wouldn't expect you to purposely make them really blue. But that's it. Other than that, I mean, the assignment's pretty good, except for, like I said, you bracketed with your shutter speed instead of your aperture, and we really wanted you to bracket with aperture because that's realistically what you'll be doing with your camera when you're shooting with tungsten lights. When you're shooting with strobes, it's much different. You have a lot more flexibility with your exposure settings because the strobes are so much brighter. But with continuous light, it's really the aperture that you're going to be relying on if you need to bracket. So hopefully you understand that. But your compositions and images are very nice. So, mostly well done. Okay, thanks, Stacy.